What is up, Vigilantes? Welcome to a brand new Arrow review, and of course, I'm saddened to say this is for the finale of Arrow, like the last ever episode of Arrow. Oh god, that was a very interesting and what can I say? Spoiler alert, very decent way to send it off for what we got. This video is naturally going to be a little bit longer than my usual breakdown because there's a lot to talk about. I want to go over everything in as much detail as I can. So, I know a lot of you are fans of the big longer videos, and if you are, I recommend going to get a drink, a snack, and then coming back and then just listening to my thoughts on this episode. But it's just crazy to say that Arrow is over now. It was definitely such a big influence on comic book TV and just everything that kind of followed after it. 8 years is a long time and a tremendous feat for any show, and it definitely deserved that spot. And I feel like this season, being the extra 10 episodes, definitely was a good tribute and exit for the show. And this last episode, well, stick around to hear my thoughts on it. But for the last time, guys, I really do hope you enjoy this breakdown. Thank you so much for sticking around with my coverage on this. Of course, I'll be keeping it up with fairly similar things, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this down in the comments below. But yeah, subscribe, guys, of course, if you want to stay up to date with more videos from me. And go ahead and like this video just to show your support for this channel, but not only this channel, but this episode and Arrow in general. But yeah, let's get into this. So of course we need to start at the very beginning of the episode, which gave a very good kind of demonstration of this new universe that Oliver kind of set up as a gift towards everyone. I mean, we've seen multiple changes in various other shows in the Arrowverse, but this first scene demonstrates a very good example of that, with Moira Queen surviving her original death from Deathstroke. This was just a really cool just way of as I said, kind of opening up the episode. And this was all told at the same time with that interview with her acknowledging this other world where she died. Like the world we're living in now, she even said, was a gift from Oliver. And even the lady herself who was making the documentary was saying that she never really expected that this documentary would be retooled into a memoriam, because if you guys remember, this was originally that documentary that Mia and Connor Hawke was watching in the future to do with kind of the fall of Star City and, the whole vigilante aspect to what was going on in the years of the city. And I don't know, it was just a really nice way to kind of tie off in this new post-crisis world. Now, this episode does start 1 month out of the crisis event, and this kind of also introduced a little bit of setup for the Backdoor Pilot as well, which may be a good thing to some people, but also maybe a little bit just like to other people, just because this is the finale of Arrow, and there were kind of reoccurring scenes where it kind of just added more emphasis to the show. I don't feel like it did it in such a way that was too nose budging, or should I say too on the nose, just because they were kind of little weaved in moments that if you watched episode 9, Green Arrow and the Canaries episode of Arrow, you'll recognize the certain connections that this episode had. For example, the very beginning one was just that crime disappeared in Star City overnight ever since Crisis, and that was with Renee speaking to Diggle. Now, if you guys remember, in the Green Arrow and the Canaries episode with Helena Bertinelli's daughter being kidnapped, it would mean the beginning of crime again in Star City, and like the whole kind of premise of mission there was to make sure Oliver's sacrifice wasn't for nothing. But previously, leading up to 2040, crime in Star City was just literally non-existent. It was even, I believe, regarded by Mayor Ramirez in the future as the safest country in America, which is just crazy. So either way, just a little bit of setup there, but there are a couple more moments throughout the episode. Also, there's just not much need for vigilantes anymore, and this is where we had the Team Arrow talking about what they're going to do now. For example, Dinah got offered the role as chief of police by Lance, I believe, because Lance is the mayor, and he's even endorsing Renee to replace him, which kind of leads up to his future as the mayor anyway, even though the future is now kind of different from the future we saw in those flashbacks. But this episode it was a really interesting way, and I felt like the episode did a good job at including Oliver in the finale, considering that the main character is dead, because that was one thing about this finale. The main character's dead, so how do you do something that isn't just purely tributey, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is nice, that's nice, but really, is this going to be the way it ends? But they kind of did a really good way of incorporating season 1 kind of flashbacks, if you will, even though these were kind of new scenes, obviously. But it was just nice to include Oliver in such a cool way with Diggle weaved throughout this episode in different scenes, because he was going after this certain name on his list, if you guys remember, of course, the little book from season 1. But we'll get back to more of that in a little bit. This is when we had Sarah picking up Mia in the year 2040. Now, this is set, of course, after the Green Arrow and the Canaries episode. She essentially goes to 2040 to, of course, take Mia to her father's funeral. But at this point in the episode, we kind of got revealed what was, you know, the main task at hand, bringing everyone together. Because from the promo photos, if you guys watched my breakdown of that, I was just wondering what the present day thing was going to be, considering it was kind of obvious we're going to get some action and some investigating, I guess, with Felicity back and them all kind of surrounded by the computer. And of course, that is that William got kidnapped. Again, even though, yeah, so we got kidnapped at the end of the Green Arrow and Canaries episode, last episode, and now he's kidnapped in present day, despite there being no kind of crime. But hey, whatever. It was an interesting one. But what I did like about the whole William getting kidnapped story was that it tied into the man that Oliver was after in the season 1 scenes during this episode. But this is where Felicity arrives. She walks straight past Mia. I don't know, I kind of laughed at that moment. I didn't know if she was avoiding her in that moment, or if she was just like, that literally didn't recognize her. It felt like she was avoiding her, but later on in the episode when she was told, oh, that's Mia, it was like, oh, she was really kind of taken back in a good way. So it didn't really seem that in this moment, after all, she was avoiding her. She just kind of completely blanked her. I don't know. I don't know if any of you kind of felt that in that moment. But of course, Felicity being Felicity helped track down where William was. And this is where we got a really cool moment from Diggle, of course, saying suit up. So this is where we got different kind of portions from different characters in the episode, all looking for William. We had Thea and Roy drama, which kind of ended, well, it's not really drama, but, you know, they were just on the rooftop, they couldn't find William, and then all of a sudden, Roy's just like, will you marry me? I don't know. I know lots of people are going to say, you know, I like the way it ended between them, and I kind of agree with that. Of course I do. Like, I'm glad they got back together. I think that's how I would have liked it, but it was personally a little bit too wishy-washy for me, for him to propose after they've been broken up for a while. And yes, I know underlying feelings, they love each other still and have this whole time, you can insert that into it. But for me, to shove a proposal in there after that long of being apart, it just would have made more sense for me if they would have got back together and then they were together forever, you know, off into the sunset, rather than a marriage. I don't know. Of course, she eventually agrees later in the episode, but for me personally, my reaction was just the same as Thea's, like a little kind of inaudible kind of like, huh? It was really nice seeing Ragman again. This is where we had Ragman and Wild Dog in an outing looking for, of course, William. We got a little bit of an explanation as to what he's been up to. Apparently, in this new universe, it took a while for the rags to work again, of course, after what happened, but ever since, apparently, he was fighting for justice to honor Oliver. It's like, really? I guess he hasn't been doing that for so long, but either way, it was just a nice time. There's quite a few, this is a finale after all. They're trying to kind of, you know, close things off, kind of close characters off and kind of give these explanations. I have to admit, some felt a little bit, not confusing necessarily, but it made me think it didn't necessarily add up. But I often just kept thinking to myself in this moment, probably maybe like quite a few other people, I don't know, just let me know, that with a finale, you just kind of have to go with the flow, I guess, because otherwise you're just going to kind of spoil something that's just trying to ride out on a good one, so to speak. But anyway, this led up to a very, very exciting part in the episode, something I was incredibly impressed by. But first I have to mention, this is of course at the beginning of that, Mia in her Green Arrow suit, she actually finds William. This is the man that Oliver of course went after during the season 1 kind of flashbacks in this episode, which brought us to this incredible, it felt like a one-shot fight scene, but it didn't. But the main thing I wanted to get out of this fight scene is that it demonstrated Oliver as at his most ferocious. Like, this was probably, I'm not even joking, like maybe I'm just not remembering certain fight scenes that could have topped this, but this was probably the best Arrow fight scene I've ever seen. Every single time I thought it would stop, it just went on and on and on and on. Like, that was so impressive. They really pulled that out of the bag. Like, that was Green goddamn Arrow. That was such a good fight scene, and it made Oliver just seem unstoppable. And that's, you know, as the Green Arrow, you want him to be mega intimidating. And that's not to put down other fight scenes in your typical Arrow episode in previous seasons, but this one just elevated it to an extent of brutality, which I kind of like to see in a vigilante. It was kind of confusing, like, were those kill shots? Of course, people are going to say some of those those must have killed some people, but considering he spared the man's life at the end, which was interesting, he went on to do like 8-10 years at Iron Heights, and obviously this kind of linked to what he said to Diggle later in terms of how it's kind of an experiment to see, if people can be redeemed, la-di-da-da. It was like a turning point for Oliver, but it's like, would he have really killed all those people before if he was only going to spare that guy's life, who was, after all, on his father's list, who, out of all of those thugs, would be the guy to die? So I kind of have to assume that those weren't kill shots, they were like disabling shots. Not really an important detail, just something to ponder. But man, that was an amazing fight scene. I know I'm going on about this, but it was just so good. It went on for so long, and I feel like I just want to stop recording this and watch it again. But I have to go back to Mia, because of course it went back to Mia after all, and I felt like, as much as I've complimented Katherine McNamara in her suit, she really looks the part. I really felt like when she was confronting the man, she was trying to put on a little bit of a deeper voice. It wasn't too bad, but I feel like in Green Arrow and the Canaries, if it gets picked up, that she needs a voice modulator. Not one that will make her sound totally different, but even Oliver had a voice modulator. He didn't necessarily use it all the time, but I think she needs it, because there were certain times where I felt like, okay, I can tell you're trying to come across a bit gruffled, like how Stephen Amell lowers his voice, but it doesn't really work for her so much. She sounds like she's trying a bit too hard. I'm not putting her down, I'm just saying she would sound a lot more kind of badass if there was a bit of a, darker kind of voice modulator on her voice. That would be great, but it just felt lacking with her just trying to do it with her own voice box. But this is where we had Felicity looking at Mia. I actually felt quite emotional at this bit because, I don't know, it was really nice. Obviously, it disregarded what I thought earlier with her just kind of blanking Mia. She didn't know whether she should go approach her or, whatever, because she was just talking about Mia with the nanny earlier on in that day and everything. I don't know, it was just really nice. Say what you will about Felicity, whether you're a big fan of her or not, at the end of the day, she's been very much so integral to this show, and having her see her daughter growing up for the first time, and we've all seen Oliver already with her. It was just an emotional moment. Now, there were interesting parts that I was questioning and kind of scratching my head about, because at this point we had Earth 2 Laurel visiting Quentin Lance, who of course has kind of been resurrected in this new universe, and she mentions that Oliver brought him back, Tommy Merlin back, Moira Queen back, but why not Earth 1 Laurel? And this is where obviously this is where they were addressing that, because if you can bring back everyone else, kind of, why not bring Earth 1 Laurel back? And he said, Quentin said, because there was nothing to kind of fix about you. I mean, it kind of, I got that in terms of that. But the other explanation was, in my mind, because I was thinking, yeah, but why didn't he bring her back, considering Earth 2 Laurel was just going to be in 2040, not even in present day, and you could have still brought Laurel back. Essentially, I think, because of the whole frequency thing or whatever, if you have two people in the same world, at least what's happening on Batwoman at the minute, they're either got to merge, or one of them can't be alive whilst the other one's alive. So think of the tough spot that kind of puts Oliver in. That's literally him deciding, do I keep Earth 2 Laurel alive, who's now been redeemed and who is a good woman and who's probably gonna go on to do good things in the future, of course, as a canary, or do I kill her or erase her, so to speak, and bring back Earth 1 Laurel, who of course was very near and dear and special to me, but of course that would kill Earth 2 Laurel. So that's a very awkward situation. So ultimately he decided not to do that, and he kept Earth 2 Laurel there. And of course you just have to put that down to the fact that you can't have two of the same person on the same Earth technically, otherwise bad stuff happens, just like we see with Beth and Alice on Batwoman with their heads about to pop or something like that. But I wasn't so sure about how I felt about the explanation later. This is kind of jumping to it, but it's relevant to what I'm talking about now. At Oliver's funeral, we had that Robert Queen moment where Thea was wondering about why, if everything has changed, why couldn't he change this? And this is where Moira, this is basically the show's explanation as to why certain people got brought back or not. And she said, I think that Oliver could only change the things that didn't change him. And I get that, because obviously if he brought Robert Queen back, then that was one of the focal things that drove Oliver forward into this whole show, like obviously honoring or righting his father's wrongs. I don't really need to explain this to you guys, but then I just kind of thought, and I don't want to get nitpicky here, as I said earlier, go with the flow kind of thing, but it did make me think, but Tommy changed, it certainly changed him, like in terms of his death at the end of season 1, but he's been been brought back, and various other characters. So I don't know, like, yet again, you could argue that's nitpicky, and why are you looking into this? You know, this is the finale, like, why do this kind of thing? But, you know, I just feel like it's a relevant point to bring up. I'm not saying I've completely mapped this out. I'm just saying if Robert Queen couldn't be brought back because, you know, obviously that's one of the, you know, he could only change the things that didn't change him. Well, I could argue that there are other characters that have been brought back that certainly did change him throughout the seasons. But this is where we're leading up to some exciting talk, guys, and we're nearing the end of the episode, kind of. This is where, in the bunker, they're kind of talking about, you know, since William's been found now, Diggle accepted a new promotion in Metropolis and will move there after the funeral, which is just interesting to consider, especially with what happens anyway, because Metropolis, you know, we got Superman and Lois coming. Of course, that's more of a family-oriented kind of dynamic-y show with Lois and the kids. But, you know, you have to think they're going to be in Metropolis at some points, and Diggle's going to be chilling there, so you never know what's going to happen there. The lights to the bunker get turned off. I don't think this moment was nearly as good as the Arrow Season 7 ending, but, you know, that's not me hating on it at all. That's just me even acknowledging what the stars have said themselves. Like, that last episode was technically the last Arrow episode. If you guys remember when we had Felicity, Diggle, and Oliver there, and the bunker turns off, that was a really nice ending. Of course, we had the memorial for Oliver, the statue revealed. This moment didn't feel so special for me as it could have, because we had this revealed in last week's episode, but hey, it was still a nice moment, especially that speech from Quentin. But back to Oliver's funeral, already spoke about the Robert Queen stuff and Moira's comment, but this is where we had Emiko meeting Thea and Moira. That's a nice, you know, considering season 7 was all about how angry and upset she was at what she's missed out on, so to speak. Now she has a family, so this is yet again a gift that Oliver has given to many, many people. We had Tommy and Laurel. This bit kind of made me think about quite a few things, because Tommy spoke to Earth 2 Laurel, saying that the Laurel of this new post-crisis Earth was his wife. So ever since season 1, where he survived, Tommy and Laurel actually got together whilst Oliver was, you know, off still being the Green Arrow, if you technically imagine that kind of this new timeline of events. So I don't get it. Does this mean that literally after the new, like, his wife just disappeared? Like, I kind of want to know what happened to that original Laurel still. Like, how did she die? You know, because obviously Tommy had a wife who was the Earth 1 Laurel. Something happened to her. I'm guessing you could still theorize that it happened around Arrow Season 4. And yeah, that's it. Like, you know, his wife just blinked out of existence, I guess, because, you know, we needed Earth 2 Laurel to stay around. But, you know, yet again, going with the flow, not gonna look into that too much. It's still nice to know that, oh, those two got together because Tommy didn't die. And obviously Oliver got with Felicity eventually. This is where Felicity met Mia properly. I really actually like this moment. Her reaction to the fact that she's already met Oliver was really wholesome, I feel, because she didn't know that. I guess she must have really, you know, liked the fact that she can imagine that, oh, at least your father got to meet you all grown up, you know, and even trained you, as Mia said. So that's a, you know, it's just a really nice, wholesome conclusion for Felicity, because there's a lot of gaps and details she didn't know about the whole crisis stuff when she was in the cabin. Of course, we had Barry there, Kara. Those were just very, very quick conclusions. But we had the Diggle speech. And at this point, guys, stuff got very interesting, because during the speech, we had the montage. We had Diggle moving, of course, going to Metropolis. We had Mia going back to 2040. But then we had Diggle seeing a meteorite land with a little green glow as it landed and blast him into the van. I don't know why. That moment just kind of made me laugh, like how he just went flying back and smack. But he found a box which, as he opened, it kind of illuminated his face green, and, you know, the Green Lantern ring had finally arrived to him. And, you know, I do have to admit, that, you know, I just thought, man, why can't we just see the goddamn ring? Like, I mean, they can't really, you know, you have to think it's because of limitations and stupid legal stuff. Like, it really is, if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty details of it. But it was still a really nice tease. But the fact is that it's so cool imagining John Diggle as the Green Lantern now. There's no way, you know, in this Earth that he's not going to put that ring on now. And for me personally, and a lot of fans, the reason why this is so important is because Diggle having a purpose and a heroic persona going forward is so fulfilling, because think how much he wanted to be the Green Arrow after Oliver has given it up, and how that even caused some drama. And now, like, kind of the mission is over. He didn't even really want it to be over. He wanted to keep fighting, but now he gets something even, not arguably better, because some people might prefer the Green Arrow role over the Green Lantern role, but he gets a cool ass persona. If you think about it, he gets to become the Green Lantern. Come on, like now I get to imagine in my head after this show that he's off doing that, which is fantastic. And I really hope somehow we get to see that someday, but I don't know, I have my doubts because we would have probably seen it in one way or another. I think a really cool inclusion would have been him flying off, like putting it on and then just flying off and just being like, whoa, that would have been a really cool moment, but you know, I guess they couldn't do that because of reasons. Diana rides off on the bike. I wanted this moment to be better because there's no explanation for the Green Arrow and the Canaries episode as to how she got in 2040. She just said after Oliver's funeral, I just appeared here. There was no trace of Diana Drake or the Black Canary, like anywhere, so it was easy for me to blend in and blah blah blah. But I thought in this moment with her riding off down that like Green Arrow Memorial, whatever it said, drive on with her on a bike, she would have just popped into the future, a teleport or something. That would have been like a cool Spectre moment maybe, but no, nothing. Yeah, nothing. And yes, this moment, guys, if you've been watching my recent breakdowns, you will know that I wondered about, but will we get to see a continuation of that scene with the Monitor and Felicity last season with her going in that breach portal? And we did. Yet again, you could still question stuff like this because this was a part of the previous future, but like, as I said, kind of go with the flow. You could still argue this happened in the new post-crisis world, I guess. Yeah, I mean, why not? But yeah, she's teleported back. Well, she goes through the breach and she's kind of like back to her younger self. This was a very nice moment to end it off on. Of course, you could still ask a billion questions here. We had Oliver saying, glad you could finally make it. This is the moment of when he technically first saw Felicity with that inclusion from a previous season. And then it kind of zooms out of the building with Queen consolidated. So like this new afterlife, it's kind of confusing. I have kind of a few questions because Oliver said that this was his mother's office. So in this afterlife, is he surrounded by loved ones? And is it, you know, relative in time to a point where when his mother has already died, even though she's still alive in present day now, but it's kind of in a situation of in the afterlife, she's already there, she's already lived her life, and she's already in the afterlife. Does that make any sense? I don't know if I explained that well, but I want to know if it's literally just him in that world, all alone, or if he's already been there with other people who've already lived out their existence in the present day, way into the future, and have died of whatever reason, natural causes, some horrible death, God knows what, but they've got there eventually in his afterlife. And he hasn't been alone this whole time. Or was this the first time he's met anyone? I don't know. I guess these aren't necessary, like completely necessary questions to ask. But as like a diehard kind of fan, you kind of feel like, oh, you know, what about that? I wonder what the showrunner or like, you know, Mark Guggenheim would say about this. Or, you know, quite often showrunners kind of like to leave stuff like that fairly vague and, you know, just up to the viewer's imagination. So yeah, guys, that is essentially the finale of Arrow. And it's just crazy. As I said at the beginning, that it's all over now. And I felt like it was a decent send-off for the show in general. Finales, you know, it's kind of a situation where it's hard to please everyone. It's impossible to do everything you probably want to do. I bet they had a whole bunch of things that they wanted to include in this. And I feel like with what they did, it was decent. But of course, everyone, I would love to know what you thought on top of what I thought in, you know, my breakdown part of this video of this episode. Did you think that it was a good finale? Do you feel like even if you thought it was good, they could have included other parts in it? And yeah, or did you even think that it wasn't as good as what you thought it could have been? As I said, I felt like they did a decent job. I wouldn't say it was absolutely fantastic. I wasn't emotional as much as what I thought I would have been. Perhaps that is a result of Oliver already being dead, and you know, the fact that, you know, that was missing in this final episode. Even with the funeral, it didn't kind of leave that moment. There were moments where I got teary, of course, but I didn't get as upset as what I genuinely have on plenty of other things. But either way, I know this was a long video, guys. Thank you for sticking around and watching it, watching my Arrow videos over the past few years of when I've been doing it. I really appreciate that. And the support, you know, on this channel. I'm sure you guys will still continue to enjoy my coverage on other videos. But yeah, it's the end of an era, so to speak. But if you enjoyed this video, guys, like it if you did. Of course, subscribe if you want to stay up to date with anything like this coming out from me. But yeah, check out my past couple of videos here, as always. But thank you so much for watching for the last time, I suppose. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you vigilantes in the next video. Goodbye.